Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
This week, there was high drama when GOP gubernatorial candidate Steve Poizner charged rival Meg Whitman's campaign with political extortion. Angry workers from the soon-to-close NUMMI auto plant in Fremont clash with their union leaders over final negotiations. Are the rains washing away concerns about the drought? Also, the personal story of one Tuskegee airman. Coming up next. Good evening, I'm Belva Davis. Welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me tonight on the news panel are Rachel Morrow, host of the California Report, KQED Public Radio, on the NUMMI workers' struggle with their union. Paul Rogers, environment writer with the San Jose Mercury News, with an update on the drought. And Carla Marinucci, political writer with the San Francisco Chronicle, with a variety of political stories from the news this week. Carla, this week's lead story is about Steve Poizner. He held a news conference and charged Meg Whitman's campaign with extortion. What was the grounds for this?
Well, the Republican side's getting wild in the gubernatorial and in the Senate race, by the way. But yes, Steve Poizner really made news when he came out, said that Meg Whitman's political consultant, Mike Murphy, had sent out an email suggesting that he was going to get cut up to the tune of about $40 million if he didn't decide to maybe move over to the Senate race. Poizner came out swinging, saying he wanted the FBI to investigate. He wanted the Attorney General to investigate. Look, in California politics, these kinds of things are discussed all the time, but nobody usually puts it in writing, and that was the mistake of the Whitman campaign. I think Steve Poizner had to do a Hail Mary pass. He's 30 points behind. He's way behind millions of dollars of Meg Whitman, who's the former CEO of eBay. But he got a lot of attention for doing this, and Meg Whitman's been under some scrutiny this week since he made these accusations. She's not debating. She's not talking to media. She's canceling interviews on radio shows. So that race was wild, but that wasn't the only race that was wild this week, Belva. We had the U.S. Senate race. Carly Fiorina put out an ad that has I think, the political community talking nationwide. It's been called the Demon Sheep ad, in which she just went after Tom Campbell, sort of accusing him of being a wild-eyed, red-eyed devil wolf in sheep's clothing. This is just the beginning, I think, of what's going to be a very fun political season to cover in
all
California.
All of these people have R after their name.
That's right.
We haven't got to the part where the Democrats.
That's right, and the Democrats in both sides have got to be loving this. That's Jerry Brown, the state attorney general, the Democrat, who hasn't really formally declared himself a candidate yet, but why should he when this kind of stuff is going on? Mm-hmm. And Barbara Boxer, who's the U.S. Senator, of course, incumbent on the Democratic side. She's got to love Tom Campbell getting cut up by Carly Fiorina, who's, of course, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard.
I got to ask you about this crazy Carly Fiorina sheep ad. I mean, it was 3 minutes long, so it's not on television, but it's all over the internet.
It's on Tom Campbell's website.
Right, Tom Campbell put it on his website. The thing is so weird with this guy crawling around with a sheep with glowing eyes. I wondered whether it was designed to be funny, as she claimed today, whether it was deliberately over the top and campy to actually get attention, or whether they intended it to be serious, but they had such a tin ear for the public that they just screwed it up and it's backfiring.
I have to think this ad, you said 3.5 minutes long, they wanted this to be, I think, a viral ad, an ad that's viewed on the internet. The consultant involved is a guy who's done some very over-the-top stuff. Remember that ad that compared Obama to Britney Spears? Well, that's the same guy that created this ad.
The celebrity ad.
The celebrity ad. But I don't think...
Look how well that worked.
Yeah, that's right. The guy's president. But the bottom line is, I don't think they expected it to get the kind of ridicule that this ad got, it is now in the pantheon of like worst political ads of all times. It's got to be a problem for Carly Fiorina. She's, has a website that's been royally panned, even though she's the former CEO of Hewlett Packard. She should kind of know how to do those kind of things. And the ad is now getting, it's all over the internet. It's had about 900,000 views the last I checked, which is huge. And as you mentioned, Rachel, Tom Campbell, this professorial guy who doesn't want to do tax, who's been really studious about that, he's put it on his website.
And
he's had his best fundraising day ever today.
And he's leading in the race.
And he's leading in the race. Yeah. So both of these races are getting a lot of attention and are already ramping up. And we are coming toward a June primary, and people are starting to pay attention. But I think the difference is, Paul, we were talking about this, we're still not hearing a lot of detail on issues from any of these people.
We're seeing livestock, but not issues.
Yeah. We're seeing livestock, but not issues. There's not a lot of details on their positions.
You get so much on your plate tonight. Let's return, though, to the first line, and that is the Meg Whitman-Poizner race.
Yeah, I mean, in Whitman's case, I have to say, what this did, the Poizner charges brought up a lot of the weaknesses of the Whitman campaign, which is the candidate herself has not been out there talking to reporters, making press conferences. She refused this week to do a debate at the upcoming Republican convention, and that is not going to go over well with grassroots activists in her own party.
But in fairness, obviously, Jerry Brown's doing the same thing. He's
yeah,
even more
and we've
distant.
got it. You're right.
I don't think anybody particularly noticed. Most voters didn't notice or understand the squabble between Poizner and her. The thing that seems to have been the game changer so far is that she spent a lot of money on radio ads and put lots of these ads up on big radio stations, and that seems to have widened the lead. I mean, is that all it took?
That's absolutely right. I mean, the money reports have come out, and Whitman has spent an astonishing amount of money. I mean,
her own money.
Her own money. We're talking, $5 million on campaign consultants alone, $3 million to put up a website. The kind of money she's spending is a level that California has never seen before and probably will never see again. She's a billionaire and has said she could spend as much as $150 million.
Well, we must say that collides with her book theme of being frugal. But we must get to Sacramento, where there was a lieutenant governor appointment to be confirmed.
Another interesting story in California politics this week, Belva, was Abel Maldonado, who's the state senator from Santa Maria, a Democratic district, who's been nominated by Governor Schwarzenegger to take over the lieutenant governor seat, which was held by John Garamendi. Why is this such a drama right now? Because Maldonado is a very moderate Republican and a Latino, and one who comes from some very interesting background, father of bracero worker. They own a strawberry farm in Santa Maria, and he's really been with the Democrats on many crucial votes, including budget votes. He's been the one guy who's crossed over. I've talked to the state party chair, John Burton, who has said that no, he doesn't think the Democrats should confirm Maldonado because why give the Republicans a foothold at the state's second highest position? This is a jumping off point to become governor. Do you want to give a guy? On the other hand, this is a Republican who maybe should be rewarded, and some of the Democrats are saying that.
Well,
so
he's got the first
he's jumped through the first two.
And so now he has to go through a full Senate and
full Assembly, and that is going to be a challenge for him because a lot of Democrats don't want to give a Republican this kind of foothold.
And it has to move fast because the deadline?
The deadline is coming up, and if he's not, if they don't make the decision, then that spot stays open. But if they make this is a point where Schwarzenegger has urged it to happen, and Democrats are going to have a real, I think, political issue on their hands if they don't reward a Republican who's been with them on many issues.
Well, we're going to move now from decisions being made by politicians to decisions being made by business people when we turn to Rachel Morrow. And the NUMMI plant closure, well, it's closing at the end of March. There are 4,700 workers, plus all sorts of suppliers that are going to lose their jobs. Why, though, were the employees angry with their union?
You've probably seen those videos posted up on YouTube. There are a lot of rank and file workers who are getting really, really nervous. March 31st is coming right around the bend. Management has put out 2 offers at this point. The second offer is sweeter than the first. There are a lot of people who are thinking mortgage payments. Do I have the cash to be able to maybe go in for some retraining this spring, or do I need to shop a resume now? They want answers from the local 2244 leadership, but the leadership is holding out, trying to see if they can get an even sweeter deal from management. And they're not listening to a lot of the yelling. In fact, they're discounting it. Initially, they argued that NUMMI was planting people in the audience against them. But the suggestion, when you actually watch the video, doesn't bear out with how many people in that hall are that angry with leadership. Still, leadership figures it's a strategic game. The longer they hold out, the better deal they win.
Oh, they're not fighting to keep the plant open?
They are also fighting to keep the
Fighting
plant
over
open.
severance at this point,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
right?
But are they
Toy-
also
yeah.
doing that?
Toyota's just losing another $1 billion over the thing this week with the brakes and all the rest of it. They're not going to keep this plant open. I mean, this is the only car plant left in California.
There's no sign that Toyota is planning to keep the plant open. But the union's trying to pressure them by operating a signature campaign, which they've been doing for months now, traveling all over California to all the auto shows, to Detroit, to Washington, D.C. And again, rank and file folks are saying, what are you doing, in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in Detroit? You should be here finishing up this retention package.
But Rachel, what is the hope? I mean, you have reported on this. These 4,700 workers has a huge ripple impact in Fremont. Is there any hope that this plant could be opened as something else, or in another automaker? And I know we've heard from some economists and labor experts who say the government should be stepping in, would actually save money if maybe some kind of stimulus funds went to NUMMI to help keep that economy and this huge ripple effect in check. What about that?
There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Nobody's come out. Obviously, you don't want to pressure companies you're trying to entice in. And there are a variety of sort of strategies that are all being employed at the same time. There's what's called a red team that involves people from Governor Schwarzenegger's administration, local economists, local politicians. They are trying to put out a plan of government sweeteners, sort of tax credits, cheap electricity deals. Maybe bring back GM. That's probably the least likely of the options. Maybe bring back Toyota, if not immediately, a little bit down the line, another automaker, another kind of company. And in the meantime, one strategy they're pursuing is trying to convince companies of all kinds to take a look at the huge network of suppliers that services the NUMMI plant. They do all kinds of things, and there are more than 1,000 companies all over the state. There's a growing estimate of how many people could lose their jobs as a result of the NUMMI closure. It's grown from 15 to 20 to 30 to 50. Now some people say if you include, the taco shop down the street from a supplier that goes out of business, what's called a tertiary effect, the number could be as big as 100,000.
Now, there was one word at one time that Senator Dianne Feinstein was working on this, and I think I heard maybe on your program one worker say, well, if only the president would call, he could stop this in a minute.
Yes, that's a labor economist, Harley Shaken, over at UC Berkeley. And the feeling is that the government is going to be spending money one way or another. Stimulus funds, billions of dollars going to create new jobs. You think of the support structure that's involved in supporting people who become unemployed when they lose jobs. So the idea is getting Washington, D.C. more fully engaged. Dianne Feinstein has been leading the fight on that side of things. She boasts, bringing in a huge multi-million-dollar loan for Tesla Motors, which might take up the mantle. They would be the next major automaker in California, but that's a couple years down the line, probably about a fifth of the size of NUMMI, so it can't be the whole answer.
It should be noted that this is the only Toyota plant in America that's unionized, right? So
Yeah.
they're closing the union plant.
Yeah.
Well, more to come. A few more weeks and lots of people working on it. So we've been talking about decisions made by individuals that haven't always worked out quite right, but Paul gets to talk about something that none of us have any control over, and that's the drought. Well, we've had plenty of rain this winter. Last Thursday it actually poured. How many more storms do we need before we can say we don't have a drought?
It's a good question, and I'd say the answer is 2. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, you have a number.
I'm going to get the quote wrong. I think it was Mark Twain who said, if you don't like the weather, do something about it. We can't do anything about this other than hope. And there's good news and bad news when it comes to the drought. We've had a drought in California for 3 years in a row. It's the biggest drought we've had in 20 years, since the 1987 to 91 drought. Now, it's not as bad as that drought, but still, it's a pain. It's very bad for some farmers who have junior water rights down in the San Joaquin Valley. It's resulted in some pain in some parts of the Bay Area. Now, the good news is the big storms that we had, particularly 2 weeks ago in mid-January, doubled the rainfall totals for the year for every Bay Area city. Dumped about 4 to 5 inches of rain on San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. Those cities are now at 115% of normal for rainfall of the year. Second good news was it added a lot of snow to the Sierra, more than 10 feet. So the Sierra snowpack, which was 79% of normal 3 weeks ago, now is 107% of normal. That's the big water bank. So that's the good news. One other bit of good news. There's still an El Nino grinding away out there in the Pacific. I read some NOAA data today from their buoys out in the ocean. And basically, they are projecting that large sections of the ocean are 4 degrees warmer than normal, which is good for the weather in California. And that condition is going to continue until April, at least. So we've got 2 more rainy months. We're already about 2/3 of the way to a full normal year for the Bay Area cities. So another couple of storms, each of which dumps 2 or 3 or 4 inches, will be above normal. The bad news, the downside is, because of the 3 years of drought, all the big reservoirs around the state are really, really low. And I'll just give you one example. Lake Shasta, the biggest reservoir in the state, it went up in the last 3 weeks by 40 feet. There was enough water added in the one reservoir, 700,000 acre feet, to basically serve every man, woman, child, business, and farm in Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Francisco County for a year. Just added to that one reservoir. But even with that, it's still only 59% full, and it should be 70% full this time of year.
So does this mean the kind of rationing and fines we were hearing about in the drought situation, we don't have to worry about anymore?
I don't expect that any Bay Area agency is going to have odd even watering days, fines, or anything like that this summer.
Given that it's been so wet this year, what is that going to mean for that big water bond that voters are expected to rule on?
Well, it's always easier to pass money, to get voters to spend money for water projects when they see a drought. You know, fear is a great motivator, and with every raindrop, the chances go down for what was already a fairly tenuous bond. I mean, California has a, whatever it is, $20 billion deficit. This is an $11 billion additional debt over 30 years. The interest on that is something like $700 million a year. A lot of that's going to build big dams, and so the question would be to most voters, especially since there's going to be opponents on this.
Right.
The environmental groups are going to spend a lot of money against it. Are voters going to go further into debt if all the reservoirs are full, their lawns are green, and they don't see any pain at all? You know, I think it's a pretty tough political
So let's talk about the state water crisis with farmers,
Yeah.
for instance, which politicians are
right.
no more.
No, I'm not saying no more. I mean, we've had years where it's rained well in February, then just totally shut off in March or April. But with an El Nino still grinding away, El Ninos create these conveyor belts of storms into California. And like I say, if we're already 2/3 of the way to a normal rain year, and we've got 2 more months, you know, the chances are pretty good that we're going to be above or, you know, at normal for this year.
Has this helped endangered species that were having trouble
It's a really
surviving?
It's a really good question. Normally, the more that it rains, the more it helps salmon and other fish. Some salmon in California, particularly coho, for example, in Marin, are so far gone and so far depleted, and maybe too late for some of them. But for generally speaking, for larger populations like Chinook salmon, the kind we eat in restaurants, it will help. And you know, more water in the rivers, the better, unless we flood.
Well,
and we're not there yet.
Good news story, at least on the waterfront.
And it's going to rain next week, too.
Okay, thank you. In fact, my thanks to all of you for joining me tonight. Now, some of the other stories in the news this week. Thousands of students in San Francisco will be putting their plans on hold this summer. City College announced it's canceling summer session this year. Trustees axed the $4 million program to help close a budget gap expected to top $12 million. Many students were depending on summer school this year, in particular because of hundreds of classes that were cut during the fall and the spring semester. Marin County is one step closer to becoming an electricity provider, despite fierce opposition from PG&E. The Marin Energy Authority approved a contract to buy electricity from Shell Energy North America, which promises to provide more renewable sources of energy. The first African-American woman to head the National Guard in any state has taken charge in California, where she will lead the country's largest Guard unit. Brigadier General Mary Kite was sworn in Tuesday by Governor Schwarzenegger. The governor called Kite a pioneer for breaking gender and racial barriers during her long career. In this first week of Black History Month, we bring you the personal story of one of the last remaining Tuskegee Airmen. These men were skilled and courageous pilots who flew bomber support over Europe in World War II. Les Williams, a San Mateo native, was part of the 332nd Fighter Group, known as the Red Tails. He was also the first African-American bomber pilot. Here is his story.
At the height of World War II, a group of highly motivated African-American pilots from the original 99th Fighter Group flew some of the most challenging and daunting missions of the European theater. They were known as the Tuskegee Airmen, and their story is more than just about individual heroism, but rather about men who were able to prevail over discrimination and American prejudice and the Nazi war machine.
Except for our uniforms and the fact that we knew we were doing something very helpful to improve our race, we knew that we were going to have to put up with a whole lot of stuff, which we did. And so that was the overall atmosphere throughout the training.
89-year-old Les Williams was one of those young pilots that went through the training in Tuskegee, Alabama. The military was segregated at the time and discrimination was rampant, but the men who wanted to fly somehow endured to earn their wings.
It was bad, and they even told us that we weren't all going to be here when the bell rings. And so the training was very difficult. They had us do things I don't think that every white cadet had to go through. But that was very helpful because it made us really try to be the best. And we told each other we're going to be the best.
Les Williams grew up in San Mateo, one of the very few black families in the area. He graduated from high school at 15 and spent a year trying to work as a dancer and as an entertainer before he returned home and graduated from San Mateo Junior College. Eventually, when World War II broke out and Williams, who'd always wanted to fly, was drafted, he spent his time in the Quartermaster Corps, as did most black troops at the time, loading and unloading ships. Luck, talent, and timing intervened, and after he passed a number of tests, the kid from San Mateo was on the train and headed for Tuskegee, Alabama, to become a pilot. He was in, however, for a significant culture shock.
So the first night was okay. Everything was Afro-American. But the next day, I became under the supervision of white officers, and they were mean. And I think I'm being nice to them. They were mean, and that encompasses everything that you can attach to the word mean. And so from then on, throughout the Cadet Corps, I was the N-word, which we heard every day. And no matter how, we had to go through 9 months of this. That training involved 9 months training. And so we had an awful time with the white officers. They would treat us like slaves.
Despite the hardships and the brutal prejudice, the men went on to earn their wings. There were 996 original airmen. They included pilots, bombardiers, and navigators, and more than 10,000 black men and women who served as support personnel. Pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group went on to escort numerous bombing raids. Flying escort for heavy bombers, the Tuskegee Airmen flew more than 15,000 sorties, destroyed over 300 German aircraft, and earned an astonishing 150 flying crosses, awarded for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in an aerial flight. By the end of the war in 1945, the Tuskegee Airmen had lost 66 pilots killed in action or accidents and another 32 pilots downed and captured POWs. Williams would eventually leave the military as a captain in the Air Corps, return home, and graduate from Stanford University on the GI Bill. He would go on to raise a family and run an extremely successful dance studio in his hometown. Some men never back away from challenges, and Williams returned to college at age 55 and graduated from Stanford Law School to become a practicing attorney. In 1948, President Harry Truman enacted Executive Order No. 9981, directing equality of treatment and opportunity in all of the United States Armed Forces, which in time led to the end of racial segregation in the U.S. military. The lasting legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen and Les Williams is one of heroism and sacrifice for men who earned the right to fly and fight for their own country.
Well, that's all for tonight. Visit our website at kqed.org/thisweek for the question of the week. Will Steve Poizner's accusations that Meg Whitman's advisors attempted to force him out of the governor's race hurt his campaign or her campaign? You can also watch complete episodes and segments. You can subscribe to our newsletter and podcasts, and we encourage you to comment on the program. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.